If you're gearing up for the JEE Advanced, you already know the math section can feel like an absolute beast, right? Today, in this explainer, we're taking on one of the most intimidating topics on the entire syllabus. We're going to crack the code on mathematical functions. Now, you might be wondering, out of all the crazy concepts we could cover, why focus so heavily on this one? What makes functions the ultimate gatekeeper of the JEE Advanced? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. Functions aren't just some isolated chapter you can cram over a weekend and then forget. No, they are the absolute core language of calculus, algebra, and advanced problem solving. Honestly, if you don't fully grasp functions, you're going to hit a wall with limits, continuity, derivatives, integrals, the whole shebang. But master this, you basically unlock the rest of the math paper. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with what a function actually is, then we'll classify them into 1-1 and onto. After that, we'll tackle the infamous fractional parts, unlock some serious hacks for functional equations, and finally, look at how tying all this together helps you win the JEE Advanced. All right, Section 1, what is a function? Let's start from the ground up. Think about this high-level question for a second. What exactly is a function, and how do we classify its behavior? I want you to literally visualize what happens when we take a number and plug it into an equation. What's the fundamental rule governing what pops out on the other side? The absolute easiest way to think about it is to picture a physical machine. You've got an input, a process, and an output. But, and here is the absolute golden rule, for this machine to actually be a valid function, every single element you drop in from your domain has to have exactly one distinct image in the codomain. Think about it. If you put one input in, and the machine somehow spits out two completely different outputs, like, say, mathematically plotting a circle where one x value gives you a positive and a negative y, guess what? Your machine is broken. It fails the famous vertical line test, meaning it's just not a valid function. So how do we classify the ones that do work? That brings us to Section 2, 1-1 or onto. Let's figure out how to categorize these functioning math machines. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we know if a function is 1-1 or onto? Getting this right is literally step one for almost every advanced calculus problem you're going to face on the exam. The distinction here is brilliant. On one side, we've got injective, or 1-1 functions. This just means distinct inputs have distinct images. It's super easy to check, just pass a horizontal line across the graph. If it hits the curve at most once, boom, it's injective. On the flip side, we have surjective, or onto functions. Here, the range perfectly equals the codomain. Basically, every possible output has a pre-image backing it up. Nothing is left empty in that target set. Now, what happens when a function is both injective and surjective between two sets of equal size? We call that a bijective function. And here is a fundamental mathematical law you absolutely must memorize. If the domain and codomain both have n elements, the total number of possible bijections is exactly n factorial, n exclamation mark. That scales incredibly fast, and trust me, the JEE loves to test you on it using combinatorics. Moving right along to Section 3, handling fractional parts. We're shifting gears to a little nuance that trips up so many students. You really have to ask yourself, how do functions behave when we start splitting them into parts, when we dissect numbers into their integer and decimal components? Because let me tell you, this is exactly where the paper separates the prepared from the unprepared. We are basically looking at two mathematical siblings here. First, the greatest integer function, often denoted by square brackets. Some people call it the floor or the ante. It always steps down to the nearest whole number. Then we have the fractional part function, sitting in curly braces, also known as the mantissa. This is simply the decimal leftover. So just to visualize, if your number is 3.2, the greatest integer is 3, and the fractional part is 0.2. Make sense? Okay, so the crucial point is this golden rule right here. The fractional part of x is always equal to x minus the greatest integer of x. Whenever you're staring at an equation and the fractional part is making it look completely impossible, swapping it out for x minus the greatest integer of x is the ultimate algebraic hack. Let's actually walk through how to apply this on test day. Step 1, isolate that fractional part in your equation. Just get it by itself. Step 2, substitute it out using our golden rule, x minus the greatest integer of x. And Step 3, apply the core inequality property. The greatest integer of x is always less than or equal to x, which is strictly less than the greatest integer of x plus 1. Why go through all this? Because actually, it transforms an impossible fractional equation into a highly solvable integer inequality. It is a real game changer. All right, deep breath, section 4, cracking functional equations. We are really ramping up the energy now as we get into heavy algebraic application. Because this right here, this is the ultimate boss battle for the JEE Advanced Math section. Picture this. You're staring at a massive, confusing functional equation. The clock is relentlessly ticking, and you need an answer. How do we crack these under pressure? Well, you don't always need to solve them the long, painful way. You need tactical hacks. First thing, immediately try substituting x and y with 0 or 1. Finding f of 0 and f of 1 often just collapses the entire problem. Second, test for even or odd properties by replacing x with negative x. If f of negative x equals f of x, it's even. If it equals negative f of x, it's odd. Third, keep an eye out for symmetry or periodic repeating behaviors. Guys, these aren't just textbook rules. They are precision tools literally designed to save you precious minutes. Now, what's really interesting here is the cyclic substitution hack. If you see an equation with f of x and f of 1 over x, don't panic. Simply replace x with 1 over x across the entire board. This instantly creates a second, simultaneous equation. From there, you just use standard elimination, subtract one from the other to cancel out those messy terms and completely isolate f of x. It honestly feels like magic, but it's just brilliant structured algebra. Which brings us to our final stretch, Section 5. Winning the JEE Advanced. Let's connect all this abstract math to your ultimate goal. You might be asking yourself right now, okay, this is cool, but how does mastering these specific concepts actually translate to securing an IIT seat in the JEE Advanced 2026 exam? Well, let's look at the real stakes. Just look at the actual data. Integral calculus sits at a massive 19% weightage, and differential calculus adds another 8%. Together, that is over a quarter of your entire math score. And remember what we established at the very beginning of this explainer? Calculus is deeply, fundamentally rooted in the language of functions. You literally cannot harvest that 27% without a bulletproof understanding of what we've covered today. So, practically speaking, how do we prepare for 2026? First, build your absolute basics using NCERT. Do not, I repeat, do not skip the foundations. Once you have that, practice multi-step, complex problems daily to build up your stamina. Take full-length mock tests to master your time management. And revise these core concepts and hacks continuously. Consistent strategic effort is absolutely key to unlocking these high-weightage topics. I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. If a mathematical function perfectly mapped your daily, consistent effort to your final JEE score, what is the domain of your potential? Think about it. The inputs you choose today directly dictate the outputs you'll be celebrating tomorrow. Keep grinding, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.